Well, shalom everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. We are finally in volume 4, the fourth and final volume of Rabbi Avigdor Miller's new translation and commentary of the Mesillat Yesharim, the Path of the Just. And I'm so excited to be launching into this next subject entitled The Explanation and the Trait of Anava, which is humility. Now, we're already about 4 parts into this chapter, and I just want to do a quick overview of what we have looked at previously. If you want to get the previous audio, let me know, put something down in the comments, and maybe I'll be able to email it to you or something. But I will just quickly go over what we've looked at in terms of understanding the trait of humility. Humility is one of the highest of the traits to attain. And if somebody is doing really well in the trait of humility, they are, generally speaking, probably on a very high level. This was one of the outstanding traits of Moshe Rabbeinu. It was said that he was the humblest of all men, which is a huge statement, meaning that, there was no other man that got to the level of humility that he did. And he was a leader. He was a leader of the nation of Israel for many years. And we don't normally associate the trait of humility with leadership. In fact, today, especially with who we see in the media, being who the presidents are, who the leaders are of various countries and various institutions, we see that we more associate the trait of arrogance to leadership, when in actuality the trait of arrogance shouldn't play any role in the execution of leadership. To a degree, one can employ forms of arrogance when they are facing off against an arrogant person, or in a place where they're facing off against arrogant people. They may employ a form of arrogance to counter arrogant behavior toward them. But generally speaking, the trait of arrogance is not a feature of the role of leadership, which is just an insane thing to realize with everything that we can see in the current world. The trait of humility is very appealing. When somebody sees that the person has tremendous humility, that draws people toward that person. It is something that people admire, and it's really the pinnacle of attaining perfection over one's traits, attaining genuine humility. We see that it is the opposite of arrogance. A person who's arrogant, who has gaiva, they are unable to be taught because they won't humble themselves to learn the basics of something and work their way up and become advanced. And people will be less likely to correct a person who has a trait of high arrogance, because they don't want to cop an earful in response when the person is being corrected. So whereas arrogance causes somebody to be severely hindered or debilitated in their journey of learning, humility is like a rocket, attaching a rocket to yourself and enabling you to just propel forward through any type of obstacles. There is the concept of thought and deed that we looked at in part 2 of chapter 22. A person has to also be humble in their mind as well as in their actions. Now, a lot of people will fixate on wanting to be humble, and their goal will be to show other people how humble they are. And when people realize that they're humble, they will give them praise, and they will show them outstanding levels of respect, and the person will get joy from people perceiving that they are humble. And so this in a way is a form of false humility, because the person is actually enjoying portraying themselves and what the results of portraying themselves as being humble brings with it. They allow them to sit in the best seats at a restaurant. They're given all the airs and graces, and they're treated like royalty because they have this demeanor about them of great humility. And this is a person that loves that, whereas a person who is truly humble doesn't think about all the benefits they get of being humble. They are just intrinsically humble in terms of their demeanor. And they won't be upset if somebody doesn't see them as humble on a particular occasion. They just do what they do. So we're kicking straight off with the Mesillat Yesharim here, and it says, all these things are blemishes in a person that he should take into consideration, that do not leave him any space to feel arrogant at all. And what are these things, these blemishes? Well, we looked at most people, in fact, not most people, every person has had something in their past that they're not proud of. Whether it's something that they did wrong themselves, or they were just born into a family. Maybe you had a parent who was abusive. Maybe you had a parent who was even put in jail. Maybe your family was very poor. Maybe you had a sibling who was put in prison for hitting somebody, heaven forbid, in a drunk driving incident. And so, all of these things may not necessarily be things that you want other people to know about. And so you should always go back to these things in your mind when you are risking becoming inflated or arrogant after having some sort of acknowledgement that you are exhibiting this genuine humility. So you don't want to let everybody's favor that is being directed at you because of your humble character to inflate your ego. And so you may have progressed genuinely up some rungs of the ladder of improving your humility, but now that you're starting to get some acknowledgement and starting to enjoy the fruits of being like this, it is beginning to get into your mind that you are somebody that's different from everybody else, and you've got this, you're something unique about you that nobody else has. And so therefore you're some sort of icon, you're some sort of very, very special individual that is removed from everybody else. And so you want to avoid that, and you want to be able to look at an ant or a worm and look at that ant or look at that worm and say, well, that ant and that worm is far superior than me because they come into the world and they do their job as they were created to do. And so the achievement of a worm is always going to be at its fullest degree. The worm is never going to not be a worm. They're going to do their job as a worm, or a spider or an insect is going to do its job as a spider or an insect. They're going to fully perform their function. And so man, on the other hand, has to work to be his full potential, whereas animals, they just come into the world and they do their potential. They do what they've been built to do. And so that's why man is to look at the order of creation and see that he was the last of Hashem's order of creation, and that animals and insects were actually created before him. And so there's all sorts of things we can do to rein ourselves in and bring our feet back onto the ground if we kind of get a little bit too, our head gets a bit too big. Even if he is a person with many positive characteristics, but he dwells on his blemishes in order to bring himself to the attitude of a Nava, these deficiencies will be sufficient to overcome the recognition of his qualities. So you really want to not dwell on the positive things that people are saying about you and find yourself locked in those thoughts all the time, or if at all, if you can, but rather focus on the things that you know you are lacking and that you want to do something about improving those areas where you're lacking. Okay, you've got all these other areas sorted out. That's great. And what most people tend to do is to focus on their areas where they excel. And most people have at least one area where they're really good at something, and they just kind of focus in on that for the rest of their lives. When I was a kid, I was quite a good illustrator. I was a good drawer. And my parents and family members and friends would go, "This kid's a really good drawer." And I used to get, pretty giddy with excitement that I was somebody, there was something about me that was unique, and people would say, "Oh, Jason, yeah, he's a really good drawer." And, I kind of started to think, I think I might be the best drawer in the school. And there came a day in primary school that I remember where we had to draw some pictures for a teacher who was retiring, or they were sick or something. And 2 other students were called in to also do illustrations. And as it turned out, as the sort of day panned out, I found out that these 2 other guys were way better illustrators than me. One of them was very good at doing cartoony type representations. The other was really good at realism. And I was kind of neither good at both. And my illustration didn't know what it wanted to be, whether it wanted to be, a cartoon or realistic. And when you sort of compared all 3, I was like way down the, running a distant third to these other 2 guys. And it was a wake-up call for me. And I was humbled that day. I was like, okay. And that would never have happened if I hadn't have started to believe what people are saying, that I was the best drawer in the school. I should have straight away from the outset gone, there's no way I'm the best drawer in the school. I'm okay, but there's, I'm certainly, there's got to be, it's a big school. I'm something that's got to be better than me. I'm not really a good drawer at all. I'm okay. I'm probably better than the average guy, but don't say I'm the best drawer in the school. And this, this really kind of went to my head, and I was pulled down very hard at the end of that day. I was like, wow. And I was embarrassed by my picture compared to theirs. And so, this is the whole thing. You've got to, if you don't do this, if you don't learn humility, it will happen to you in a way that you don't like. If you live long enough, or depending on what happens. So Rabbi Avigdor Miller says, the author is explaining that there are various stimuli that help a person become humble. Everyone has plenty of faults in their character because nobody is born perfect, and it takes training and learning for a person to eradicate the natural tendencies which create faulty behavior. If a person looks back on his career, how short it is, he'll surely see that there are plenty of things that will enable him to be humble. For example, I know an actual story of a laundryman from Scranton who came to Brooklyn and founded one of the largest yeshivot in America. I'm sure he always remembered, especially since he learned Mesillat Yesharim, that he was once a laundryman. He didn't allow people to call him rabbi, only mister. And so, that's the thing that we learn that Yeshua speaks about when he says, call no man rabbi, call no man teacher or father, is that you don't want people to be enamored by their title. There's some guy out there who's a doctor. He's a doctor and he's a rabbi, and his title is Rabbi Doctor blah blah. There's no greater threat to a person than them studying at some sort of discipline at university and then having the title doctor added to their name. That's something that's going to be very hard for a person to swim out from in terms of keeping them humble. Once you have the term doctor in front of your name, even if it's a doctor of theology, it can be a doctor of basket weaving. Once they give you this official title, doctor, or if some people do it with the term rabbi. And so rather than having enjoyment from having these titles, a person should run away from these titles. They should be like, gosh, don't call me a doctor, I mean, obviously if you're a doctor, but, you don't want everybody to address you as doctor. Just call me Sam. Just call me John. Just call me Mary. Like, what do you have to, do you want to be reminded every 5 seconds when you're in conversation with a person that you're a doctor? It's only going to help inflate your ego and help you become more and more arrogant. And eventually you're going to be in for a rude shock. One day, it's just a matter of when. The Gemara says that it's not good for women to be arrogant. They should be more humble. The sages cite the example of Devorah, who was a prophetess, and criticized her for not having enough humility. The Gemara makes a remarkable statement that one of the reasons she should have been more humble was because of her name. Devorah means bee, and this is not a complimentary name at all. Her name should have inspired her to be more humble. It says humility here. Inspired her to more humility. The name should have inspired her to more humility. To us, it seems ridiculous, but great people utilize these things. Every person can use the opportunity to realize that they came from the earth. Who am I after all? My flesh is created from the materials which my parents ate, which came out of the earth, and eventually they're all going back to the earth. Even the most important, powerful person will be put into the soil, and he'll become soil again. I am dust in my lifetime, and surely when I will die. And that is taken from Tractate Berakot 17a. In fact, I think there is... that's a quotation from Proverbs there. There is no man in the world who is so righteous that he will only do good and not sin. That's from Ecclesiastes 7:20. And that was when it was talking about remembering your past. If there's something that you didn't do, maybe it's something to do with your family. Everybody has something that they're not happy about or they're ashamed of that's happened in the past. But rather than look at these things as negative things to make you feel more depressed, you can go to these things as a refuge to keep you more anchored to the ground in terms of how you view yourself. You have a sobering view of yourself rather than an inflated, egotistical view of who you are. Every person can use the opportunity to utilize that they came from the earth. Who am I? After all, my flesh is created from materials which my parents ate, which came out of the earth, and eventually they'll all go back to the earth. So essentially, we all came from a putrid drop, and eventually we will pass away, and our bodies will begin to stink, and they will smell worse than any smell we could possibly imagine. Sure, they might keep the body refrigerated, or the rigor mortis is designed to get all the blood out of the body, and they put chemicals into the body to have it smelling a certain way. But ultimately, we will just be like a turkey on a slab. And it sounds a bit morbid, but at the end of the day, if you remember that one day you will go to the grave, no matter how good you look now, no matter how fit you are, no matter how agile you are, sharp as a tack, or strong, no matter how strong you are, one day eventually that strength is going to leave you. Also, you weren't born descending from the sky. You were born from a woman in the most ignominious way. When you were born, you were filthy and had to be cleaned and washed off. And at first, you were lying in your own dirt and had to be constantly cleaned. So the act of birth itself, which is how everybody comes into the world, is a messy scenario. It's a messy thing. It's not a clean, you're not delivered by a stork from the sky. You are pushed through a very narrow canal, and there's all sorts of things that come out with you. If it's a cesarean, it's also a bloody mess as well. You could say that's nothing, everybody is the same, but people who are interested in attaining the midah of a nava, keep in mind that they are nothing but flesh and blood. Like Abraham said, I am nothing but dust and ashes. Wow. According to Genesis 18:27. So Abraham said, I am nothing but dust and ashes. David Amelech said, I am less than a worm. And so if this is what Abraham Avinu and David Amelech are saying, and they're them, and you're you and I'm me, and we're nothing in comparison to them, what are we? So these are very good elixirs to extinguish the growing potential trait of arrogance and ego. Part 6, consistency. This is not the attitude of the world in general, because people in general concentrate on their good qualities and ignore everything else. Even if you have no good qualities, they invent or imagine them. Even if they have no good qualities, they invent or imagine them. But a person who seeks to succeed in his midah of anava, which is a very great achievement in character and in the service of Hashem, utilizes everything he can to humble himself. Either the fact that he comes from an unimportant family, or because of various things that happened to him in his life. And the great Jewish sage, the Kofetz Chaim, he was from a kind of a fairly modest family as well. And so that was something that he would often remind people who began to kind of venerate him and started treating him like royalty, beyond royalty. So he would do various things and remind people and say, listen, I didn't come from a very good lineage myself. I sort of worked hard like everybody else. Don't get too excited. This doesn't mean a person should have an inferiority complex. Now, this is important. This doesn't mean a person should have an inferiority complex. An inferiority complex is when a person suffers from being inferior and wants to overcome that and become superior in his feelings. So this is very important, because you could argue here that, Jason, you're teaching a person to have an inferiority complex. And the answer is no, I'm not. One who has an inferiority complex, they are very much suffering from the fact that they feel inferior. Where in this instance, a person is strengthening themselves to avoid the trait of ego and arrogance by reminding themselves that they are nothing, and so therefore they are imbued with great strength and great fortitude and great accuracy in how they're viewing themselves, and saying, well, at the end of the day, I'm ash, I'm dirt, I'm less than a worm, but I am still in a position where I can serve Hashem in this world. And so that is very much something that gives me all the joy and the pleasure that I need, even more than I need. And by acknowledging that I am not necessarily better than you, it gives me a great enthusiasm, it gives me a great strength, and it gives me a great level of fortitude, because I'm not seeing myself more than I am. And if anything happens, I'm not above it. I'm not above doing that. I'm not above shining that person's shoes. I'm not above going and get that person a drink of water. I'm not, you can't look at me like that. You can't, you should think before you speak. Look at who you're talking to. It's these this is the type of language that begins to kind of crop up in a person who's beginning to display the trait of arrogance and ego. So it's very much not a thing where a person's learning to have an inferiority complex. On the contrary, it's learning to keep a person's feet firmly planted on the ground in the face of huge levels of spiritual achievement that they're achieving in their avodat Hashem, in their service of Hashem. And people are beginning to acknowledge that. The landscape's beginning to change, and you're starting to become somebody who is a force in the Torah world, yet you remain with your feet firmly planted on the ground. Okay. He'd like to be strong and arrogant and to feel important. The anav, the humble person, however, delights in gaining an attitude of lowliness in order to humble himself. Of course, the main objective in all forms of humility is to be humble before Hashem. So we're going to read that paragraph again. This doesn't mean a person should have an inferiority complex. An inferiority complex is when a person suffers from being inferior and wants to overcome that and become superior in his feelings. And he wants to overcome that and become superior in his feelings. I just read that, sorry. He'd like to be strong, arrogant, and feel important, and to feel important. And Anav, however, delights in gaining an attitude of lowliness in order to humble himself. Of course, the main objective in all forms of humility is to be humble before Hashem. Anybody who is proud is already in competition with Hashem. Someone might say, I may be arrogant, but when it comes to Hashem, I am certainly not competing with him. But in fact, it is that person who is arrogant is already arrogant toward Hashem. But in fact, it is that person who is arrogant is already arrogant toward Hashem. Why is that? Because you can only behave toward Hashem with those character traits that you possess. If your character traits are good, then you can behave toward Hashem with good character traits. If you have negative character traits, then you behave toward Hashem with negative character traits. So the arrogant man is arrogant toward Hashem too. That's how it is. Don't try to deny it. And an arrogant man is also arrogant against Hashem. And a lot of times when we're interacting with other people, we are interacting with other people, and it's the same as our interaction with Hashem himself. Because especially if they're another person who is professes as being part of the Commonwealth of Israel, they're part of the kingdom, no matter what station they are in life, how we treat them is how we're treating Hashem. Because these are all part of Hashem's kingdom. And so the lowliest person within the kingdom, whoever that may be, that is a manifestation of Hashem in that lowly station. And many times there are stations within the kingdom that are higher and that are lower. And none of them are more important or unimportant. In fact, an argument can be made that the lowliest people are sometimes the more important, going with the whole concept of the water carrier being greater than the king. The water carrier, his job is to go to the river and pick up fresh water and carry the fresh water in containers up to the palace and deliver the fresh water to be given to the king to drink. Now, the king doesn't go down. He doesn't probably even know the route to get to the lake. And he probably doesn't even have the strength to carry enough water for himself for a week, let alone anyone else in the palace. But it is the strong, broad-shouldered, simple water carrier that brings the life-sustaining water to the inhabitants of the palace. We'll see ways and means of how to express that humility toward human beings, but in the final analysis, it's a form of service of Hashem when a person is able to overcome his natural tendencies that emphasizes, I and besides me there is nothing else in the world. That attitude is born within us. Even a baby in its crib has that attitude, and it remains in many people all of their lives. If we overcome that attitude, then we are capable of thinking about serving Hashem. That's why a Nava is such an important achievement. So essentially we're saying here, the Mesillat Yesharim, or Rabbi Avigdor Miller is saying here specifically that without the trait of a Nava, you really can't serve Hashem properly. You really can't serve Hashem properly. Hashem hates the trait of arrogance. He hates people that are full of pride and ego. He runs a million miles away from it. But somebody who is humble, somebody who will humble themselves, bow down and go and pick up something. A small child drops something and it falls under a couch, and they'll go down on their knees and fetch it and give it to the child, and then stand up again and pat them on the head. No matter who the person is. Once a year, Hashem comes out into the field during leading up to Rosh Hashanah. We have a month where the king actually removes himself from the lofty confines of the palace environment, and he actually goes out into the field to see the common man. Metaphorically speaking, Hashem comes out to us in that month and meets us where we're at. So Hashem himself employs this trait of humility. Part 7 of chapter 22, wisdom especially leads to arrogance. Now, this is interesting because wisdom is one of the things that we want to attain, and we know that the beginning of wisdom is fearing Hashem, which is something that many people don't talk about or teach on. But when we do achieve some level of genuine wisdom, it is this very attainment of this wisdom that can actually potentially draw us into the greatest error by gleaning a measure of arrogance from achieving this wisdom for much effort and sacrifice. So we have to be extremely careful in the pursuit of the Torah, the knowledge of the Torah and Hashem, that we along the way don't sacrifice our humility for our wisdom. We're so caught up in achieving understanding and knowledge that we leave our humility behind. And instead we have brought with us genuine wisdom, genuine knowledge, genuine understanding. It's genuine, it's right. No one can refute what you're saying is correct. But the whole manner in which you are choosing to share these truths is in a manner that is not in the correct behavior. It's not the correct way. And so the enemy has managed to find an inroad and cause you to be off kilter with Hashem, not through lack of knowledge and understanding and effort, but through being sidetracking you into going headlong into achieving wisdom, and in the course of that, robbing you of achieving the trait of humility. It's very, very interesting. The most effective means of bringing a person to self-elevation and arrogance is his wisdom. Isn't that something we're trying to attain? Wisdom? Yeah, it is. But we have to be very careful in the quest to attain wisdom, because in doing so, it brings about elevation, spiritual elevation, but it can also bring about a feeling of self-elevation in us. And we have to duck and weave that at every turn at whatever cost. When a person is educated, especially if he's learned in Torah, that's the best reason to feel important, and that's going to cause him his biggest test. The wiser you are, the more highly you think of yourself. I'll say that again. The wiser you are, the more highly you think of yourself. Now, somebody's watching this video right now, and they're watching me and they're going, this guy's, who is this guy? What right has this guy got to share this information? The guy's not Jewish. I've watched some of his other videos. He's a little bit he's a bit of a hack, this guy. And you're sitting there watching it with that attitude. And you go, he can't pronounce certain Hebrew words correctly. His Hebrew's really bad. Who does this guy think he is? See? Just stop for a second and think about the attitude that you're having towards me in this video. And you're thinking, who's this guy? What gives him the right to get on here and make a video about this stuff? He can't even, get basic things right, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you're thinking, stop for a second and think, whereas your attitude should be, wow, like this guy, he's recognizing that the Torah is a great source, a great treasure to learn and to inspire other people to learn as well, no matter who you are, whether you're Jewish, whoever you are, and to go, okay, well, I'm gonna learn some Torah. I'm gonna learn Torah is for everybody, but not everybody. Not all the Torah is for everybody. If that makes any sense, the Torah is for everybody, but not everybody does all the Torah. I guess there's certain Torah for a man and a woman. There's certain Torah for a Kohen and a non-Kohen. There's certain Torah depending on what job you have. There's certain Torah depending on a myriad of circumstances that you're in. And so whatever Torah that you have to observe, that's what you need to learn. But a lot of people don't do that. They choose to just want to learn all the cool stuff and they ignore the Torah that's applicable to their circumstances. And people will often get sidetracked by this due to arrogance and ego. The Mesillat Yesharim says, because that is a superiority in a man himself, in the most important part of him, in his mind. The Rabbi Avigdor Miller says, the mind is the most important part of the human personality, and therefore a person feels justified in being proud of a good mind. This will be a much bigger barrier to humility than someone who feels proud of his physical features like height or strength. And this is what we see with people who actually are in positions of leadership or royalty. And it's when, like, I saw a video not too long ago, and say whatever you like about King Charles, most people don't really like him. I saw a bunch of cyclists come across him walking in the Highlands on a cycling video. I don't know how it came up on my feed. And they sort of knew that there was possibly some form of royalty in the area because they started seeing these black sedans. But it was a biking channel, and up ahead they could see this guy walking by himself, and it was King Charles. And, they were surprised to find that he didn't have any minders around him, though I'm sure there were people that are way off, could see him with binoculars maybe. But he said, I like to go for walks. And he sat and he spoke to them for a good 5-10 minutes. And it was such an amazing experience for these cyclists. And it was just like this normal conversation. The conversation flowed, and this is the King of England. And he went out of his way to talk to them, ask them how they were and where they were going, and showed an interest in what they were doing and shared with them what he was doing and a little bit of history of the place. And it was just an amazing little video. If you ever get the chance, have a look. Just type in King Charles meets cyclists. And granted, there are things about King Charles that I'm not really kind of happy about. But at the end of the day, when I watched that video, I thought, right, that's really good. And you've got to call the plays as you see them. You can't just be so in love with somebody that they never do any wrong, or have so much disinterest and annoyance with somebody that everything they do is wrong. Not everything that somebody that you dislike is going to do wrong, and not everything that somebody you like is always going to be doing the right things. But you have to be honest, and when they do a good thing, you just say that was a good thing. And so this was a sign of, this was very definitely a moment where the king was showing real humility by taking the time to talk to these cyclists. The mind is the most important of human personality. Therefore, a person feels justified in being proud of a good mind. This will be a much bigger barrier to humility than someone who feels proud of his physical features like height or strength. The Mesillat says, but still there is no wise man who does not make any mistakes. He who does not learn from others, many times even from the words of his disciples. Many times students are able to show their Rebbe that they made an error. And this is true. There are many occasions where the student will actually be teaching their teacher in certain ways, shapes, means, and forms. If this is the case, how can a person elevate himself because of his wisdom? Let me read that whole paragraph again. But still there is no wise man who does not make any mistakes, and who does not intend to learn from others. Many times, even from the words of his disciples, many times students are able to show the Rebbe, that is their teacher, that he made an error. If that is the case, how can a person elevate himself because of his wisdom? Sometimes you need another person to kind of bounce something off. Don't be so sure that everything that you do is going to be spot on. Even if you've had a good positive run for a while, there's every chance that you could slip up somewhere down the track. This is why the Torah tells the story in which Moshe Rabbeinu was corrected by Aaron, according to Vayikra chapter 10, verse 16 through 20. Moshe asked, "Why didn't you eat from the korban today?" And Aaron answered, "How can I eat from the korban? My sons died today. I am an onan and can't eat from the korban." And Moshe heard, and it was good in his eyes. Moshe Rabbeinu was portrayed here in a situation in which he forgot something. It's almost impossible to believe that Moshe Rabbeinu made an error, but the Gemara says he admitted and he was not ashamed. So we have recorded in Leviticus that Moshe Rabbeinu in chapter 10, verse 16 through 20, made a judgment on Aaron and was made an assumption about something Aaron was doing in his Avodah Hashem service in the temple. And Aaron corrected him and said, no, and Moshe said, okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Okay, I agree with that. And he didn't feel embarrassed. He went, yep, I've been corrected. Okay, let's move on. It didn't faze him at all. And so it's a good little kind of glimpse to show you that, and there's another occasion where the 5 daughters, remember the story of the 5 daughters that their father had no sons and their land wouldn't be bequeathed to them, and Moshe inquired of Hashem, and these daughters actually got to retain their lands. So there are, and also his advice he received from his father-in-law Jethro. So you can see Moshe's humility in action in quite a few locations in the Torah itself. This story is in the Torah to teach us that there is nobody who is not vulnerable to errors. Therefore, a person who has an excellent mind should know that his mind can make errors too. He should be humbled by the fact that no mind is perfect. And this is one of the reasons a person, I believe, grows old. It's because as you do begin to grow old and your strength starts to leave you, and even your mind starts to, not be as sharp as it used to be, it causes you to be humble. And so the whole process of aging will bring a person more inclined to do tshuva as they start to lose things that they had for so many years, and it begins to give them a more humble attitude. So the whole process of aging is designed to bring a person's level of humility to the fore. Because you need help. I need help. And to the point where then eventually you need help putting on your socks. You need help with somebody putting on your shoes. And you become reliant on somebody helping you. And, it's a huge thing. And rather being nasty about it and being angry by that whole process, you use it to keep you in check and to go, at the end of the day, my life is drawing to a close. I'm in my twilight years and I'm happy to get here. Most people don't even get to be where I'm at. I can sit down and look out over a sunrise and I can write my memoirs. I can write some wisdom down and perhaps help somebody else. I've had all sorts of things that I've lived through. There's somebody just in the last 30 years, we've lived through so many things. It's quite astounding. And you've lived through that. You started at one end and you came out the other, and you're still here. And so there's a lot to be gleaned from that. Hashem is stuck by you, and you're still here. But you have to make sure that they are not going to be barriers in your career toward the midah of a nava. Did I miss a bit there? Let me just go back a bit. We're not saying that wisdom isn't important. I think I need to go back a bit further. Therefore, a person who has an excellent mind should know that his mind can make errors too. He should be humbled by the fact that no mind is perfect. We're not saying that wisdom isn't important. On the contrary, you should try to gain all the good things that you can. Try to gain wisdom. You could even try to gain big muscles too if you want. Cool. You have a right to try to gain all good things, physical and spiritual, but you have to make sure that they're not going to be barriers in your career toward the midah of a nava. So if you want to gain big muscles and work out in the gym, I've said this to people in the past who I've met in the gym because I like to train and I like to do bodybuilding as well. And I've seen guys that are overweight, and I can just tell by their proportions and the way their build is, even though they're overweight, that these guys could be quite successful in bodybuilding. And I said to one individual recently, not too long ago, I said, when you do become successful in terms of your body sculpting and you get the six pack and you become huge, can you promise me one thing? And he said, yeah. I said, promise me you won't become arrogant and keep the attitude that you've got now. And he said, yeah, okay. Because the guy's overweight, he's self-conscious, he's not getting in everyone's face. He sort of takes the seat near the back of the room. He's quiet. He's a delightful guy. But I can, you always have to want somebody. Okay, I think you've got potential and I think you can achieve this goal. And it gives a huge boost. And when I said that to him, when I said, listen, just make sure you don't become a nightmare. You keep the attitude you've got now. You've got a great attitude. But don't let your muscles and your good physique ruin you. And don't let anything ruin you. Be humble and know remember where you're at now. And be a source of hope and help to other people, because a lot of people who make areas of achievement in their physical makeup, that can carry over also into their spiritual endeavors as well. They realize that going to the gym takes time, effort, it takes a special diet, and it takes work. And then they start to realize that, listen, if I'm going to excel spiritually, I need to spend time learning, and I need to learn consistently, and I need to put that learning into practice. And so once the person has success in one area, it can give them confidence to have success in other areas, more critical areas as well. Even if you have a wonderful mind stocked with all kinds of wisdom, nevertheless, you should realize that you are capable of errors. Very good advice there. This is all Rabbi Avigdor Miller here. Of course, we have to add one thing, like the Kavod Halavavot says in Shah Hakina chapter 2. Moshe Rabbeinu succeeded because he was always aware that he was standing in front of Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu always succeeded because he was always aware that he was standing before Hashem. If you're standing in front of Hashem, you'll always realize how small you are. That's the most effective method of helping you to overcome the barriers of the greatness of your personality. You're standing before Hashem. Who are you in front of Hashem? And this is the key. Don't compare yourself to other people, because there's millions of people that you can find that you're better at any given thing. And you'll have a propensity to compare yourself against people that aren't as good as you. And then there's always someone that's going to come along that's going to be better than you, a lot better than you, and it's going to put you in your place. But if you compare yourself against Hashem and against Hashem only, you'll always be in the right place, and you'll never be found having somebody have to put you in your place, because you will already be there. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this one. Please hit the like, please subscribe, and please share. And until next time, Hashem willing, bye for now.